"I'm at the cemetery with your Aunt Caroline," she said shortly. "That wretch drove us here and then simply drove away again. And the superintendent has gone to lunch and the office is locked. I never heard of such a thing. We've walked for miles." Well, I must admit that the picture of Mother and Aunt Caroline in their best black left stranded at the Greenwood Cemetery was almost too much for me. It is miles from anywhere, and I doubt if either of them has walked 4 blocks in as many years. But I agreed that it was dreadful, and to send a taxi for them at once. Which I did immediately. When I turned it was to find Annie at my elbow. "I suppose that Holmes has gone, miss?" "How in the world did you know?" "Because he carried his clothes away last night," she said promptly. "Why on earth didn't you tell us that?" "And get my throat cut?" she said darkly. "No, miss, I know my business and I value my life." I went back to his room over the garage at once, and discovered that Annie was right. He had slept there. With a guard around the house, he had been no longer needed inside it. His bed was untidy and his bathroom had been used. But his closet was stripped bare of clothing and his battered suitcase gone from under the window where it always stood. There was no question but that Holmes had gone, and it looked just then as though a $3,000 car had gone with him. Mother got out of a taxicab shortly after that, and limped into the house. What with the heat, her heavy black and a very considerable indignation, she was in a state of almost complete demoralization. She sat down in a hall chair and closed her eyes, and she said nothing whatever until Annie had unlaced and taken off her shoes. "Then, that wretch," she said. "I never did trust him, and I never will." "And right you are, ma'am," said Annie. "You'll be lucky if you ever see him or the car again." "That's what I think, besides making you walk on that bunion in this heat." "Look at it. That's arthritis, Annie," Mother said sharply. We got her upstairs and into bed, and I turned on the electric fan. Then Mary sent up some luncheon on a tray, and what with rest and some food she grew more calm. It was not until she was comfortable and quiet that I told her that Holmes's clothes were gone and that whatever his reason might have been for leaving her and Aunt Caroline in the cemetery, it had evidently been planned at least a day ahead. After that I notified the police, but it was 2:30 by that time, and too late, as we knew later on. So far as we were concerned, The remainder of the day was uneventful. At 3 in the afternoon I saw Brian Dalton, perhaps less florid than usual but impeccably dressed, get out his car and drive off in it. But I did not know then that he was on his way to a downtown office, where the district attorney and 2 or 3 other men were grouped around a desk on which were lying, carefully tagged, a handful of scorched buttons and 2 irregular pieces of window glass, held together more or less neatly by 2 rubber bands. Then, as I understand it, you do not identify these buttons? How can I? I suppose automobile overalls are much alike. I wear them to save my clothes. But you admit burning your overalls the night following the murder. That's the fact, isn't it? Admit? What do you mean admit? I burned them, certainly. It isn't the first time I've done so, either. You can ask my man, Joseph. I wear them until they're soiled and then have them destroyed. Precisely. But isn't this the first time you've done it yourself, Mr. Dalton? I mean, hasn't this Joseph always done it before? Perhaps. I don't remember. And before I go on, I want to know my status here. Am I under suspicion, or am I merely to help you with your investigation? If I'm under suspicion, I shall want my lawyer. In a way, everyone is under suspicion just now, said the district attorney smoothly. I can only remind you that an open statement of fact has never hurt an innocent person, and that I don't think you have been particularly open so far.